The phone call that changed my life happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I was focused on a spreadsheet when my phone vibrated. It was my dad. I answered, but he didn't speak. I could hear voices in the background, so I stayed on the line. "Emily is our biggest disappointment." My dad's voice came through as clear as crystal. "She wasted all her potential. At least Michael went to med school like we planned." My mom agreed. If only she knew how to handle money like her brother. The irony hit me like a punch. I had been secretly paying their mortgage for 6 years through my company, JSC Holdings. Their mocking laughter kept going until my Uncle Bill intervened. "Don't you guys have any shame? Emily is worth more than the two of you combined." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. It was time to wake up. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. My life has always been about numbers, strategies, and investments. As the CEO of JSC Holdings, I turned a small inheritance from my grandmother into a financial consulting empire. It's ironic to think that my dad used to call me bad with money while I was secretly keeping a roof over their heads. It all started 6 years ago when I found out they were about to lose the house. The bank had already sent 3 foreclosure notices. Michael, the perfect son and respected doctor, was too busy with his new speedboat to help out. So through my company, I bought the debt and took over the payments. I didn't even need to negotiate. The bank manager practically begged me to accept my offer. Christopher, my financial advisor, thought it was crazy. "Emily, you're making life easier for people who never recognized your worth," he said, adjusting his glasses with a worried look. But I couldn't ignore it. It was the house I grew up in, where all my good and bad memories were made. Every month, I transferred the money into a specific account. They never suspected that the generous bank restructuring was really my silent intervention. Meanwhile, they kept splurging on vacations, expensive dinners, and gifts for Michael. Uncle Bill was the only one in the know. "You have such a big heart, dear," he always said, "but be careful not to get hurt." I ignored his warnings, thinking that someday they'd realize my worth. Now, after that accidental call, the truth was clear. No matter how much I did, it would never be enough. And worse, through Uncle Bill, I found out they were planning to blackmail me for more money by coming up with some story about health problems. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had always been a tradition, but this time the atmosphere was different. Sitting at the solid oak table, the same one that had witnessed 2 decades of criticism disguised as concern, I watched my dad carefully carve his roast beef. "Emily, dear," my mom began, her voice as sweet as poisoned honey, "your dad and I are really worried. His medical treatment costs have gone up a lot." I kept a neutral expression, remembering that Uncle Bill had already warned me about this farce. Michael, my brother, interjected between bites. "Dad, let me help." But he was quickly shut down with a gesture. "No, son, you're already doing too much for us. You need to save money for your new clinic." "Emily," my dad said, as he wiped his lips with a napkin, his eyes fixed on me, "I know your little business must be turning a profit. We need help with the medical bills." That little word business burned in my ears. The very company that kept this house standing. I watched it all like a stranger. My mom nervously twisting the napkin, Michael discreetly checking his outrageously expensive phone, and my dad staring at me with that childhood-honed look of superiority. "How much do you need?" I asked, my voice firm. $20,000 would be a good start, he replied, as if doing me a favor by accepting my money. "Monthly?" my mom added in a near whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael raised his eyebrows, finally taking an interest. I picked up my wine glass and watched the red liquid swirl in the crystal. "I'll think about it," I said simply, tasting the bitterness of both the wine and the hypocrisy. "Think," my dad scoffed. "After everything we've done for you?" Calmly, I got up and grabbed my purse. "I need to go. I have an important meeting early tomorrow." It was a lie, but I had to get out before the words caught in my throat. I drove home in silence, with the city lights reflecting off the windshield like the tears I refused to shed. The following Monday, I received the email I'd been waiting for. My parents had missed their monthly mortgage payment for the first time in 6 years. Christopher came into my office holding a stack of documents. They ignored the 3 collection notices, he explained as he spread the papers across my desk. Technically, we can now take full control of the property. I swiveled my chair towards the window and stared at the Manhattan skyline. 6 years of keeping that house, waiting for even a hint of recognition or change. All I got in return was that accidental call and a blatant attempt at extortion. How long do they have? I asked, still facing away from him. 30 days to sort it out, or we'll start foreclosing, he said. I turned back to my desk, picked up my pen, and its weight felt different now. It wasn't just a signature, it was my declaration of independence. Emily, Christopher hesitated. Are you sure? This is going to shake the whole family. I signed the documents with a calm I didn't really feel. The earthquake already happened, Chris. They just don't know it yet. That same afternoon, I got a message from Uncle Bill. Your dad is telling the family that you refused to help with his medical bills. Sarah's crying into a corner, saying you're an ungrateful daughter. I took a deep breath and typed, "Let them talk." The following days were a true test of patience. 2 more notices came in, and I ignored them all. Michael called, his voice thick with condescension. "Hey sis, what's with this story about not wanting to help Dad? You know he's always done everything for us." "Everything for you, you mean?" I shot back before hanging up. On the 29th day, Christopher brought in the final documents. JSC Holdings now had full legal control over the property. I looked at the stack on my desk. Contracts, payment records, ignored emails. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, truce, and most importantly, breaking free from the chains I'd helped forge. "Prepare the final documents," I instructed Christopher. "It's time they meet the real owner of this house." The moment of revelation came on a Thursday night. I purposely chose dinner time when I knew the whole family would be gathered. With Christopher by my side, I rang the doorbell of the house that technically had been mine for 6 years. My mom answered, her smile fading as she saw my advisor. Michael was there too, just as I had imagined, probably ready for yet another dinner where they'd discuss my shortcomings as a daughter. "Good evening," I said as I walked in without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." My dad got up from his favorite armchair, the same one he'd bought with the money I'd loaned him last year. "If you came to bring the money we asked for, you could have just transferred it." Christopher opened his folder and spread a bunch of documents out on the coffee table. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I'm Christopher Anderson, financial advisor for JSC Holdings." "What does that mean?" Michael interjected with a confused look. "It means," I replied, my voice firmer than it had ever been in this house, "that you missed this month's mortgage payment." My dad laughed. Yes, that laugh of superiority I knew so well. "There must be some mistake. Our deals are with the bank, not with your little business." "No, Dad. Your deals have been with me for 6 years." A deafening silence followed. Christopher methodically explained how JSC Holdings acquired the mortgage, how the payments were managed, and how every single cent invested in the house was documented. "Impossible," my mom whispered, her face paling. Why would I do this?" I finished. "Because contrary to what you all think, I'm not a failure. Because even after all the favoritism for Michael and all the belittling, I still cared." Michael picked up one of the documents, his doctor eyes scanning every detail. "Is this some kind of revenge?" "No, little brother, it's business. The house is in default, and as the legal owner, I'm exercising my rights." My dad, who until then was in shock, exploded. "You can't do this. We're your parents." "I can and I will. You have 48 hours to vacate the property." "Emily," my mom wept, "think about what people will say." "The same people you told that I'm an ungrateful daughter? That I refuse to help with non-existent medical bills?" My dad's face turned red. "How could you? Remember that accidental call, Dad? The one where you called me a disappointment and planned to blackmail me for more money?" Christopher gathered up the documents. "Officers will be here on Monday to enforce the eviction." "You're not my daughter," my dad declared, his voice trembling with anger. "No," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I'm not the daughter you wanted me to be. I'm better than that." I left that house for the last time, ignoring my dad's shouts, my mom's sobs, and Michael's stunned expression. In the car, Christopher asked, "Are you all right?" "For the first time in forever, I'm great," I replied. That night, Uncle Bill called me. "I heard what happened. I'm proud of you, dear." His words meant more to me than all the years of false approval I'd sought from my parents. Finally, I was free. The attack came the very next morning. My dad, Robert Thompson, isn't a man who takes defeat lightly. His very first act of retaliation was to try and ruin my professional reputation. I woke up to dozens of messages from my business partners. My dad had emailed every major client of JSC Holdings, accusing me of fraud and financial manipulation. Sitting in my office, I read every single defamatory message he had sent out. One email read, "Your own daughter is not trustworthy. How can you trust someone who kicks her own parents out of the house with your money?" Michael, always eager to show his loyalty to our parents, used his medical contacts to spread rumors about my mental instability. Soon enough, whispers that I was having a nervous breakdown began circulating in every social circle we frequented. The final straw came when I received a call from my biggest client. "Emily, I've gotten some very concerning information about you," he began hesitantly. "Let me guess," I interrupted. "Did my dad get in touch?" After I briefly explained the situation, not only did I keep the client on board, but I also won his full support. "I've been through something similar with my own family," he confided. "You're doing the right thing." Later that afternoon, Christopher rushed into my office. They hired James Peterson. I felt my stomach drop. Peterson was known as a cutthroat lawyer specializing in family disputes. "I expected as much," I replied, keeping my cool. Soon after, I received a court summons. My parents were claiming I'd coerced them into the mortgage, arguing I had taken advantage of their financial vulnerability. Michael had even signed on as a witness, alleging I'd always been manipulative. "Do they really think they can win this?" I asked Christopher as he reviewed the papers. "It's a desperate move," he replied. "We have every transaction documented, every payment recorded. They signed every document knowingly with the bank, not with us. They didn't even know you were behind JSC Holdings because they didn't want to find out." That night, my mom tried a different approach. She showed up at my apartment, red-eyed from crying. "Your dad is really sick, Emily. Please, just reconsider." "The fake tests Michael forged prove otherwise, Mom." Her face showed pure shock. "How did you—" "I have my contacts too, at the hospital where Michael works." She left without another word, but hours later I was bombarded with messages from the extended family. Uncles, cousins, everyone was horrified at what they labeled my cruelty. Only Uncle Bill stuck by my side. "They're desperate," he said on the phone. "Robert never thought you'd have the guts to face him like this." Looking out of my office window at the city that had embraced me, the city that allowed me to build my own empire, while my family rooted for my failure, I said, "You know, Uncle, I think that was the problem. They never really knew me." The retaliation attempts continued in the following weeks, growing weaker and more desperate. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing after their approval. I was simply standing up for my right to be respected. The first thing I did was fortify my defenses. Christopher coordinated a legal team to document every smear, every threatening email, every hostile text message. We cataloged everything methodically, building a legal wall around me. At work, I called a meeting with all my employees, not to explain myself, but to be transparent. "I'm going through a complicated family situation," I announced. "This won't affect our business, but you might get a few unwanted calls." Sandra, my assistant of 5 years, raised her hand. "We already have. Your brother called yesterday trying to get into your personal calendar." I smiled, grateful for her loyalty. "Nothing leaves this room without my explicit approval," she added. At the bank, I beefed up the security on all JSC Holdings accounts. Michael had tried and failed to get financial information using his favorite child status. The bank manager, who knew the real value of my empire, just laughed off his arrogant tone. "Miss Thompson," the manager later called, "I suggest we document every single unauthorized access attempt." My apartment got new security cameras, not because I was scared, but as a precaution. I even instructed the doorman on who was allowed up. a short list that completely excluded my immediate family. Uncle Bill helped me recover old documents, photos, letters, bank records. "Your dad was always meticulous about paperwork," he remarked, handing me a yellowed folder. "This might be useful." Inside, I found the complete history of the original mortgage, including their failed attempts at refinancing before I stepped in. Every document proved they were on the verge of losing everything before JSC Holdings took over the debt. Then Christopher brought more news. "Peterson is arguing that you deliberately withheld information," he explained, adjusting his glasses. "But every document from the mortgage transfer bears your parents' signatures. They never asked about JSC Holdings because they didn't want to know. At work, I implemented new digital security protocols. Our servers were now protected against any hack attempts. Michael, who had taken a few programming classes in college, had already tried to breach our systems twice. It's sad you have to protect yourself from your own family," Sandra commented as we organized the files. "They're not family anymore," I replied, surprised at how easily the words came out. "They're just people who shared my last name for far too long." Every legal document was reviewed meticulously. Every penny invested in the house, every improvement made, every bill paid, recorded with surgical precision. JSC Holdings had followed every legal protocol to the letter. "They don't have a case," confirmed our lawyer. "They're just trying to buy time." That night, while sorting through the final documents, I found an old photo of me, a little girl smiling next to my dad. It was strange to think that little girl had grown up to become someone he despised so much, and yet someone far stronger than he ever imagined. I put the photo away in a drawer. That little smiling girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had finally learned how to protect herself, legally and emotionally. There was a knock on my apartment door at 11:15 p.m. Through the security monitor, I saw my parents standing in the hallway. My mom was holding an envelope, and my dad had that old authoritarian look that no longer scared me. "Emily, open this door," his voice boomed down the hall. "We're your parents. You can't ignore us forever." I hit the intercom. "You have 5 minutes to leave, or I'll call security." "Daughter," my mom interjected, her voice trembling, "we brought all of your dad's medical documents. Please, we just want to talk." I took a deep breath, remembering the past weeks of attacks and slander. The fake tests Michael forged? Don't waste your time. My dad's face turned to pure fury. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you." "Everything you did for me?" I finally opened the door, keeping the security chain on. "Calling me a failure while I was paying your bills? Planning to blackmail me for more money? You don't understand," my mom tried to explain. "Your dad and I only wanted to manipulate me, control me, make me feel inferior to Michael. Mission accomplished, congratulations." "Don't be dramatic," my dad snapped. "We always knew your potential. We just wanted to push you to be better." I laughed, a humorless laugh. "Better? I built a multi-million-dollar company while you called me incompetent. I saved your house while you were planning to exploit me even more. It was all just a misunderstanding," my mom tried again, tears in her eyes. "We're family." "Family?" I raised my voice. "Family doesn't try to ruin each other's professional reputations. Family doesn't spread lies about mental health. Family doesn't fake medical tests." My dad stepped forward, his face red with anger. "You don't have the right." "I have every right. The house is mine. The money is mine. My life is mine. You have no power over me anymore." "You're going to regret this," he threatened. "When you realize what you lost, I've already wasted too much time trying to prove my worth to you. It's over." "Emily, please," my mom sobbed. "We're your parents." "No," I replied, feeling a surprising calm. "You're the people who gave me life and then spent years trying to tear me down. You have 24 hours to leave the house. After that, the officers will take over." I closed the door, ignoring my dad's shouts and my mom's sobs. Watching through the monitor, I saw them finally give up and leave. I sank onto the couch, trembling, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline, the thrill of finally saying everything that had been stuck in my throat for years. My phone vibrated with a message from Uncle Bill. They called me. "Are you okay?" "Better than ever," I replied. And it was true. For the first time, I felt no guilt, no need to explain or justify my actions. The power they once had over me was broken, as if a spell had been undone at midnight. The day of the eviction dawned cloudy. I watched from my car as the officers supervised the removal of all the furniture. My parents had tried to delay the inevitable until the last minute, but now all legal options were exhausted. The house I had fought so hard to preserve over the past 6 years was almost unrecognizable. In one final act of spite, they had damaged walls, ripped out electrical fixtures, and destroyed the garden that my mom loved so much. It was as if they wanted to ensure that if they couldn't have the house, nobody else would enjoy it in decent shape. Michael showed up in his fancy car to oversee my parents' move. He saw me in my car and started toward me, but an officer stopped him. "The owner has a restraining order, sir." I watched until the last moving truck drove away. My mom, sitting in the passenger seat of Michael's car, was openly crying. My dad kept his eyes fixed ahead, his posture rigid with pent-up anger. Christopher arrived soon after for the initial inspection. "I'm going to need to call an assessment team," he said while taking photos of the damage. "They really went all out in their destruction." I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the bare walls. The bedroom I'd had during my teenage years showed new cracks in the plaster, and the kitchen, where so many silent dinners took place, had its cabinets torn apart. "Do you want to sue for the damages?" Christopher asked, jotting down notes. "No," I replied while running my hand over a scarred wall. "Let it be. It's their final outburst of anger." Before leaving, I stopped by my dad's old office, where he used to berate me for my foolish career choices. There I found one forgotten photo, me at 5 years old, smiling while sitting on his lap. I left the photo where it was. That smiling little girl was gone, just like the dad in that old picture who pretended to love me. I locked the door for the last time and handed the keys over to Christopher. "Call the brokers," I instructed. "I want this house sold as soon as possible." I watched in the rear-view mirror as the house shrank away until it disappeared, taking with it the last chains of my past. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. The house sold in record time. The new owner, a young couple with 2 small kids, didn't care about the marks on the walls. They were planning a complete renovation anyway. I used the money from the sale to establish the Thompson Foundation for Entrepreneurial Women, dedicated to helping women achieve financial independence. 6 months went by. I haven't heard from my parents since. They moved to another state. Michael occasionally tries to reach out through mutual acquaintances, but his messages are always the same, a mix of regret and manipulation. Uncle Bill comes over for dinner every Thursday. "You seem lighter," he said on his last visit, and he was right. The burden of carrying my parents' expectations, of chasing approval that was never coming, had finally lifted off my shoulders. Last week, during a talk for the foundation's beneficiaries, a young woman asked if I regretted cutting ties with my family. "Family," I replied, "is not just about blood. Family is the people who celebrate your success rather than tear you down, who support your growth instead of trying to hold you back." Yesterday, I signed the papers for the expansion of JSC Holdings. As I looked out at Manhattan from my office window, I realized I was finally free. Free from needing approval, free from guilt, free from the burden of a family that never really wanted me. The sun set over the city, and for the first time in a long time, nothing held me to the past. There's only the future, bright, promising, and entirely mine. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this.